Hey folks, Patrick France here, host of my podcast, The Everyday Millionaire, inviting you to listen in on my conversation today with my guest, Dr. Cindy McGovern. Dr. Cindy is a top-rated speaker, best-selling author, and consultant, and has come to be known as the First Lady of Sales, who's on a mission to empower people and companies to get what they want through sales. Dr. Cindy believes that people can get more of what they want in work and in life by using the skills of a sales professional. She is in fact a doctor with her master's in communication and doctorate in organizational communication, leadership, and ethics. She believes we're all born with sales skills, and she wants to help you embrace your inner salesperson to get what you want and what you deserve. Listen in, enjoy. Okay, let's get on with this show and have a conversation with today's guest. My guest, Dr. Cindy McGovern, is a top-rated speaker, best-selling author, and consultant, and has earned a reputation, let's say, as the First Lady of Sales. And she is on a mission to empower people and companies to get what they want through sales. What she refers to as that icky word that makes people cringe. How did she learn to embrace that dreaded activity? Well, after years of consulting companies and helping them grow their businesses, she had an epiphany. Every job really is a sales job, and every person is a salesperson. Throughout her career as a college professor, a salesperson, and a consultant, Dr. Cindy realized that people can get more of what they want in work and in life by using the skills of sales professionals. She is, in fact, a doctor with her master's in communication and doctorate in organizational communication, with an emphasis on organizational leadership and ethics. Today, she focuses on bringing companies and people together to grow their businesses and get what they want in life and in work. Because, believe it or not, you were born with sales skills, and Dr. Cindy and I are going to dig into that conversation in a big way. Had a blast having this conversation with Dr. Cindy. Listen in, enjoy. Dr. Cindy McGovern, welcome to the Everyday Millionaire podcast. Thanks for joining me.
It is an absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
You know, I always am honest with my audience. You know, I totally dropped the ball in this, in the first initial part of my conversation with Dr. Cindy here, and my SD card glitched and I forgot to push some buttons. A total rookie mistake. So, Dr. Cindy, I apologize for that. And, let's talk about the fact that we're just meeting for the first time. You're in San Francisco. I'm in Vancouver, two of the most beautiful cities in the world, similar weather. And here we are today. And, for my audience and for me, because we have just met, which is really cool. I love to meet new people. What the heck do you do, Dr. Cindy?
I work with companies and individuals to help them grow their business, but more importantly, use sales skills to get what they want at work and in life.
And you're obviously pretty passionate about it because you've written a book about it.
Yes. I really want to take sales out of the boardroom and put it in the classroom. I think it's something that should have been taught in high school. And I want to help people to realize that they do this well all day, every day, but they can do it more purposefully, and it's going to actually pay really big dividends.
So tell me about the title of your book, Sell Yourself.
So this book came out of sort of the last few years and seeing people go through transitions and change. And whether you changed your job, the world changed around you. A lot of people rebranded. There was the Great Resignation, the Great Remorse, and the Great Reset. I believe the next thing is the Great Rebrand, where people are really taking themselves and saying, okay, this is how I want to be known. This is my legacy, whether it's your leadership legacy or your entrepreneurial legacy. And the part they're forgetting is they have to sell as part of that. And I want to be able to kind of de-ickify sales to do that more purposefully.
It's interesting, and I got the title of the book right away. And what's interesting is, having been on the stage many times with primarily real estate investors and small business owners, or individuals who want to be entrepreneurial, or real estate investors who want to raise capital, we're saying to them, there's certain skills you have to develop. You have to have the ability to, sell yourself, to create a brand. And they're going, hold on. And, like I say, generally half the room goes quiet, goes, nah, that whole sell thing doesn't work for me. I'm sure you've come across that in your travels many times.
All day, every day, honestly, because I work with a lot of people who would not consider themselves sales people. And what's funny is I used to be one of those people. I never wanted to be in sales. I had this horrible vision in my mind of, it's this pushy, manipulative salesperson, like very, very one-sided. And that's not sales at all. That is manipulation. And so what we have to recognize is we're all selling every day. You're probably just not calling it sales. You're calling it convincing. You might be calling it helping. It's still sales. There is some sort of transactional component to any kind of an exchange.
As I'm talking to you and I'm thinking about that, I literally know people that sell nothing. Okay. They don't have a product. They don't have a service, but they're just brilliant at being who they are. And if they had something to sell, I would buy it from them.
Right.
But, like, are you sure? Can I give you some money? It's like, and it's not just about that. The point is that, there's a lot to be said about selling yourself in terms of relationship building. We talk to real estate investors and entrepreneurs, building a power team, creating relationships with your team. Even being a great leader takes selling yourself. They have to buy into your vision. They have to buy into your philosophy of business, your philosophy, perhaps even of life and culture and all those things. That's selling. And that's what people
Absolutely.
don't understand that they're doing. They just don't call it sales.
Right. And it's very funny you say that because there's the whole epilogue is about your leadership legacy. And I do believe that. And people forget you're selling that vision. You're selling the culture. When someone comes to interview with you or you're interviewing a potential investor, there's a sales transaction happening there on both sides, by the way. And you got to know what your end game is. You've got to know what facets of your brand you want to elevate so you can convince them that you're a good investment, that you're going to be a good steward of this, that they can trust you. You've got to ask for the business. You've got to follow through and follow up. These are all parts of a sales process, but we don't break it down that way. We think of it as rapport building or relationship building. It is 100% a sales transaction.
Okay, so you were inspired to do this over the past few years, given, I think, what sounds like, and I'm not saying this is true, it just sounded like it, is that through the shift of what's happened with the pandemic and COVID, people reinventing themselves, having to do things differently, some going back to work, leaving a job. But you said something I want to go back. It was a comment you made, or it was a reset, or no, something about remorse. And I don't remember, what was that? I had not heard that one, and I thought I'd heard them all. Can you remember?
So, for sure. So there was a whole piece where it was the Great Resignation, where millions of people. And then there was the Great Remorse, was what they were calling it, because it was, everybody went, oh my gosh, what did I just do? Or, oh, well, maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Maybe I should go back. And then it was the reset. It was like, okay, well, this is where it is now. Let's figure this out. But as the world is sort of figuring out what the next step is, there is a rebranding component. Whether you moved or not, there is a rebrand, because everybody you're talking to, you're engaging with, teams are hybrid now or completely virtual. People have moved physical locations. There's so many things that are different. We're selling ourselves differently. And it's very funny because we have like companies that go through mergers and acquisitions and things like that, and you're combining teams. You are now selling yourself to those teammates, but you don't think about it that way. And that's exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to gain their trust. No sale ever happens without trust. That's literally what you're selling.
Well, I'll take a little bit of liberty with the word trust. I do a segment called The 4 Dimensions of Trust. And, and it's really basic. It's, are you telling the truth? Are you reliable? Are you competent? And do you care? And each one of those segments I speak to, right? And you could be telling the truth, you could be reliable, you could be competent, but if I call it the give a shit factor, if you don't care, you're out. There's components of all of that break down trust in a really interesting way. And I shine a light on it because it's so important. And part of that, I think anyways, the selling psychology is that if you're entering the conversation in the same values as the person you're talking to, if you're really entering where they are, that right away means that you're listening and that there's a degree of trust and rapport that you can build within that.
That's huge. And I completely agree with all 4 of those, by the way. because that's exactly what happens. But I find that so many people confuse rapport and trust.
Mm-hmm.
Rapport is I like you, I can hang out with you, we could really have lots of business conversations. I'm still not going to invest.
Yeah. Doesn't mean I trust you.
Yeah. And it's because one of those components is missing.
Sure.
And I think that's where your brand really comes into play is what haven't you sold them on then? If they're not thinking you're competent, you haven't sold that piece of your brand. If they're not thinking that you care, you haven't sold that piece of your brand. And that's where you're stepping in your own way.
It's interesting, Dr. Cindy, that as we sit here, and this is for me, we went from literally 60 or 70 live events where we're on stage in front of a couple hundred, a few hundred to 1,000 or whatever the number is, but we're on live events, live stages. And of course, a number of things happened when COVID hit. Number one, we had to pivot and readjust the business model. Secondly, we have a national community of real estate investors and entrepreneurs right across Canada, literally shoreline to shoreline. But now we were having to meet and create a virtual world. Now, what's interesting about all of this is how much resistance initially there was to this Zoom thing or, Microsoft Teams and oh my gosh, and it's clunky and it's this and it's that. Here's what I've noticed, and I want you to kind of give your comments on this. Those individuals who are progressive, who sell themselves, who really understand that this is what is. I don't have to necessarily like it. I don't have to, I can say it's not what I want it to be, but it is what is. And that is, we have this world of Zoom. Now, I know that you've been on many interviews and many podcasts, I'm sure, that, you wonder, or that you've hosted even. And you go and you have somebody on there and you're going, what the hell? You're going to be interviewed. I'm looking at you, you're well lit. You've got, you've got your background set up, your lighting is there, all of the stuff that matters. I'm in my office, which is now, of course, virtual, well lit, microphones, all of the things that I need. And I'm going, this is part of me earning credibility with my audience. Now, that audience of 1 or 1,000 doesn't really matter. How I show up matters. And the environment I create for people to view and listen to me matters, which is exactly what you've done on your side. Now, the reason I ask is because you wrote the book, and how much of that do you see in the block that people face in going, you guys, just get it. You're going to be on camera. You've got to set yourself up to look good, to be good, to have a brand. Okay, so I've talked enough. Give me your thoughts.
So it's so funny that you say that, because that's one of the things as a business coach I'm often coaching people on. It's like, just because we're in 2D, I can still see that you're in sweatshirt and sweatpants. Like I can still see you. And it's very funny because a client of mine asked me earlier this week, she's like, you're always put together. And I'm like, because I'm going to work today.
Yeah.
I'm always Dr. Cindy because I'm going to work today. It doesn't mean I'm not going to wear jeans tomorrow on a Saturday or something, but you're selling that credibility. Like you said, your background is crafted. You created this brand that you want people to buy because you want them to trust that it is professional, that it is going to deliver good information. And we are a multi-sensory community, truly. And I talk in the book about selling to the 5 senses. You have 5 senses. You can go into a restaurant. If it looks good but doesn't smell good, you're not going to eat there. So we have to recognize that even if the information's amazing and the packaging isn't so good, it affects your credibility. It affects the trust.
So how do we support, people, or where can we go with the conversation? Because, you've got the super salesmen that are out there going, yeah, no, this is what I do. I love to do. You got realtors who are fantastic. And by the way, you've got realtors that are not so fantastic, and you actually want to coach them maybe around a little bit of how they could improve. That aside, where do we go with the individuals? Because I think that's the important conversation, is really with those people that don't realize that whether you have a product or a service to sell, you have to be looking at what you're doing as selling. And to be honest with you, I don't care if you're a postal worker. I mean, at the end of the day, how do you want to show up in the world,
What is the legacy you want to leave, literally? And recognizing that people are having an impression of you already. And it's your job to make sure it's the one you want them to have. And so you have to sell that vision. And I think this is the part where people don't necessarily think about it. They're like, well, I'm not a celebrity or something, or I'm not on social media, so I don't need a brand. You have one already. You're doing something isn't what you want people to think of you. You're selling to your family, you're selling to your kids, you're selling to your neighbors. And what I think people don't see, and especially those that don't consider themselves sales people, like the realtor or that kind of thing, they may have to actually be a little bit more intentional about that brand and elevating, I call them the facets of your brand. We all have superpowers. We all are multifaceted. We have different interests. We have different talents. If you want people to recognize you as a capable, competent, really good worker that is eligible to create a bigger role for themselves and can take more responsibility. If you are a person that you are trying to brand yourself as someone that I can trust with my money, then you're going to help me get a good return on the investment. I need to see that in everything you do. And it's not just the 9 to 5. It is you embodying and living your brand, because I am buying not just that facet of you, I'm buying all the facets.
So there's a lot of places I'd like to go. I hope to go in this conversation, because I think it's an interesting conversation, because you're not talking about a corporate brand necessarily, although you could be. You're really talking about an individual's brand, and most people don't think in those terms. And, something that you said that I'm a big believer in is understanding your superpower. And when you talk to people, and I've actually done a podcast. I think Stephanie, my wife, and I did a podcast on, what's your superpower, and understanding what it is. And if you don't know it, ask your friends, because they know it. It's 100%. Like somebody who knows your superpower. And the thing about a superpower is that most people don't know. They don't recognize it, because they just do what they do and they go, I don't know, I just do it. Well, okay, but don't you know, like, nobody else can do that as well, and they don't get it. So my point, I guess, with that conversation is and I haven't had the opportunity to read your book, but I definitely will. Do you actually have a conversation with your clients, or within the book even? Do you talk about superpowers? Do you say, and do you give some examples of superpowers?
I do. And I actually help them. So the book is a little bit like a workshop in a book. Yeah. It's the old college professor in me. I can't help it. It's homework. But in the book, I take you through exercises to discover your superpowers. And part of that is exactly what you talk about on that podcast, which is ask the people around you because they know. But on the flip side of that, you're also going to take an honest inventory, and you're going to have them tell you what your superpowers are not. Yes. Because we may not have full awareness around that. And I think of these like talent shows that you see on TV, and it's like, oh, who told you could sing? No, that wasn't very kind, and it's for ratings and all those things. But the bigger issue is there is no self-awareness. And to really be able to sell a brand, you have to have that self-awareness of how the rest of the world is perceiving you. And if you don't have that, or you're tone deaf to it, you're never going to sell. Never going to be able to do it.
Something I was for a long time very tone deaf to my superpowers. Really, really bad. My wife Stephanie used to it drove her crazy, like exasperation trying to get it through to me. And that was, well, it wasn't that long ago, but it was back then. It was a history. But the point of it is that when I found, for me, and I'll just for me, and I think this would resonate with many, is when you start to say your superpowers or state your superpowers out loud, it seems a little bold. It seems maybe a little, I don't know what the word is. I don't know, vain, conceit. Maybe some of those words would play into that. Yeah. And some people have trouble owning, I know I did, my superpower. And it's like, well, yeah. And I would go, it's not that big a deal. That was I go, what? There's nothing special about that. And, people would look at me and go, dude, you're going to make us crazy, But having said that, I also knew my weakness. They pointed that out. Oh, they're such a great team. They went around the table and they slam, slam, slam. I go, oh. But something? I shifted, I changed because of that.
Right.
But it was hard. It was really hard.
It's funny that you say that, though, because it really is that level of self-awareness that you have to be able to know how to get where you want to go. And without that, we're a little bit flying in the dark. But the conceited narcissist thing, I have to comment on that, because it's very funny when people think that their work is speaking for itself. Or of course, everyone trusts me, right? Well, they see that I'm doing all of this and I'm putting together this group and, I'm doing all the research to find the buildings we're going to invest in and all, they're doing all the things. But if you really think about it, it's less narcissistic to actually say, my goal is to help this happen and here's how I'm working on it, versus you just doing the work and then expecting everybody to know how awesome you are.
Right. Well, yeah.
They're actually thinking about that. They're like thinking about you 24/7. It's not happening.
Well, it is an interesting conversation to have. I can walk into certain situations now in meetings and or conversations where I go, well, the good news is I'm really good at that. I got that. I can handle that. This piece over here, not so good at that. Get one of the other team to look after that. But here's what I'm really great at, and I'm 100% confident I got this, right? But there was a time years ago where I couldn't have done that. I just didn't, to your point, I didn't have the self-awareness and probably even the confidence I don't think I even knew it. I just wasn't aware of it. So anyway, superpowers. So your book is literally a little bit of a workbook, or a lot of a workbook, where you're going to have to put pen to paper or something. You're going to have to do the work and answer the questions and step out of your comfort zone of really, you think you have a brand. But I don't know, Dr. Cindy, here's my thoughts. Most people don't understand that you have to create a brand intentionally. Very few people have a gifted brand. You have to be very intentional about it.
And it's funny because I have, the 3 sections of the book are create the brand, live the brand, sell the brand. Mm-hmm. And it is that creation piece. Mm-hmm. And it's because they think, well, if I'm not a celebrity, I don't need it. Yeah, you do, because you are already making this impression on everyone around you. So is it really the intention? And I see this with people who have been passed over for promotions or haven't gotten the funding they wanted, and they don't understand why. And it's because they're missing a key component of their brand, or they haven't sold the brand. They haven't created the trust so they could sell it so people want to invest. And what I giggle about in that regard is, we've all been there, right? I didn't know my superpowers. You didn't know your superpowers, but we were willing to do the work. Mm-hmm. And the key is, if you are willing to do the work, it is a workbook, essentially. You've got to take the time to do that. But if there's anything that is standing in your way of getting more of what you want in your life, I would invite people to examine their brand. Mm-hmm. It's playing into it, whether they realize it or not.
I love these conversations because I have them quite a lot, different context, I guess, in some regards. But it's such an important conversation for people to have that want to get ahead. Stephanie, who's an Olympic coach, talks a lot about, or we've had conversations where everybody wants the gold medal. Everybody wants the successful business. Everybody wants the outcome, but they're not willing. This goes back to what you just said. Are you willing to do what it takes to get that outcome? And most people want the outcome. They're just not willing to do the work. And what part of the work is really creating who you need to be in the context of your brand and living that. I think I heard that you say that it's the process of living your brand, becoming it. But you design it. It's a creative process to say, how do I want to show up? Who do I want to be? And that's just, I love that conversation because I think it is so important for people, especially those who are saying, nah, I don't sell, or I don't need to sell, or I don't sell, and they're also often the same people who are probably not really happy with their income. They're not happy with the business that they're doing, or they're not happy with their job. And this is all part of it.
Yeah. And I would tell those people, you are selling though. And that's the problem. You are absolutely selling. You're selling either the wrong thing or you're selling it the wrong way. And so recognizing that sale is already occurring. People are buying a version of you already. Mm-hmm. And getting where you want to go, it's probably because of one of those things. And I look at sort of the personal branding aspect as, if you take a brand of a company or you take a brand of a product, it's all the things. You have a game plan for how you're going to bring it to market. The target audience, the people that are going to help you, the best opportunity to bring it there. It's the same thing. If you're looking for investing or you're doing something, you're looking for all these pieces, but you had a plan to start with. Mm-hmm. When you're creating the brand, that's the plan.
Well, I just love the conversation. I'm sorry, I'm all over it because it's interesting. I look back, I've been in business many, many years, and I think about the number of people who I've seen as talented, who have some ability, I'm often the first. I go into coach mode easily, and so I want to help them, and I want to help them. But then I see the resistance to wanting to show up differently. So it's one thing to have the skills, and the reason I bring that up is I think about people I've had conversations with over the past 3 or so years of COVID. That jobs, to your point, jobs are shifting, changing. They want to shift. They want to change their job, and they're looking for a promotion. They're looking for a different position. They believe totally that they're qualified, that they deserve the promotion. But how often do you see, as a coach and as an author, the key is that you're maybe listening and talking to that person and you're going, yeah, you're just not the brand. You're not representing yourself well.
I would venture to say 95% of the time, that's what happens. And I'm the same as you. I go into coach mode in a second because I'm addicted to helping people.
Yeah.
A stranger on a plane and they tell me their problems, I'm like, oh,
let me fix you.
I totally get it. But I love that. I love being able to help people.
Yeah.
One of my superpowers is helping, right? Mm-hmm. I help people get what they want. I help companies grow. But what's funny is in that moment, it is that willingness to be uncomfortable, willingness to look in the mirror and do that honest inventory of this is the way I think I'm showing up. Clearly I'm not. And these are the things I have to do for it. And I was literally on the phone today with a potential client, and we were talking about his sales team. He runs an insurance company. We're talking about his sales team. And he said, they want the success of a 20-year career in 20 days.
Yes.
And I said, that's the problem is, they want, and people look at someone who's successful in sales and they say, oh my gosh, Patrick, you've done this for so long. It's like, yeah, I was, I tell people jokingly, I was a 20-year overnight success.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
You didn't see all the things that went into that. It's the same thing with your personal brand. Not everybody is going to see all the things that you're doing. You have to elevate those facets so they see this is where you're headed. And especially if you're doing some kind of a pivot. If you're moving, people like to compartmentalize you and leave you in that file. So if you're moving from being a realtor to an investor or running, different kinds of companies, or if you're building out a team, you've got to sell that part of the brand because everybody goes, no, but you do this and you're so good. You stay here. This is where I like you. And you're in this file. No, you want to move. You're going to need those people's help. You're going to need people's support. You have to sell them on the idea.
There's a psychology, I think, to selling in this context that we're talking about here today, and brand, and, really paying attention to how you're showing up, maybe even creating your own ethos and understanding what that could even represent. And, there's a psychological barrier that I see because we often talk about people that are trying or are having difficulty making a decision. And because this is a decision, you have to decide. And the other day, I actually came across, I don't know that I'd ever even looked up the definition of a decision. And I think I did, and I'm probably not doing it any justice, but it basically is letting go. It's to let go or rip away. And it's interesting is that people who are going, shifting their brand, the decision is tough because they're having to let go of what they're comfortable with, what they know. And of course, they have to be prepared to step into what they're going to call the judgment of friends, family, peers, and others.
Completely. And it's funny because in the book, there is an exercise about can't decide. and then I pose 5 questions to help you. And then it takes you to your core values and figuring out that ethos piece. So that is the kind of that workshop piece. But what's funny about that is people have to be comfortable with the unfamiliar. And I don't necessarily call it a comfort zone. I call it a familiar zone because you might not actually like where you are. Mm-hmm. Pushing against that in this moment, and you're going to be pushing out of that to be able to grow. It's like, the plant moving out of the pot kind of a thing. But people have to recognize in their own personal brand and where they're maybe struggling in the parts of their brand to get others to buy into it. It's because they didn't make a conscious choice about it to begin with. And if you're selling 2 brands, they're competing with one another. And I have a story about that in the book where people don't know where to put you. So they don't know how to help. And they want to help you. They want to support you, but they're just unsure. And they don't have the trust that you really mean you want to do this because I see you doing this and this and this. They don't know how to help.
So interesting. As I think about my own journey, I'm north of 60 now, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, I think I'm always trying to, I don't know, I'm not going to say reinvent myself. That would be a stretch, but I'm always looking at how can I improve my brand. It's always there. And, I've recently, like literally have had some interesting insights into myself and some habits I've got to change, some ways of being that I have to improve on or shift around. And, so I think it's a journey that once you're on it and once you've traveled that path, you don't know another way.
And that's absolutely true. And it's funny because that's sort of like that second section of the book is the living part. We're living, and I could have easily called that section learning. It's both. It's you're living this and you're realizing how it's received in different places. And you and I have been on stages with many different people in the audiences, and you're reading the room and you're seeing and you're elevating different facets of your brand, given where you are and how you're connecting with people. That was all selling, but it was because of the feedback we were getting in that moment. And if we're not looking for that feedback constantly, that's also what makes us tone deaf to some of the things that maybe aren't working. And I wrote a blog about this not that long ago, but why you're not getting promoted.
Right.
You're just not aware of what pieces of you are out there and the narratives out there. And you've got to control the narrative. And that's part of you living it and learning is you've got to change those perceptions. That's part of the role that you have of selling your brand. Got to make sure everybody is the advocate for the brand you mean to be out there.
Okay, so I think I have an answer to the question I'm going to ask you, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot at all.
Quiz time.
I'm going to be the kind of I won't call it the devil's advocate, but I'm going to be the person that's kind of going, yeah, why do I need to do all this? Why do I do all this? I mean, yeah, I'll get the promotion, who cares? But I mean, give me a little bit of depth into even some of your own clients, what came out of this, what has shown up, or what do you see as a result of, really doing this work?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is if you don't care, recognize that that is part of your brand. Selling the apathetic brand.
Sure. Good answer.
If that's what you want, go for it. Stay there. Perfect. Doing a good job.
Yeah. How's it working for you? Okay.
Yeah. But if it's working for you, it's totally fine. But if you are trying to advance, if you are trying to move your place in the world, that is the effort of this. And so where I've seen this is anytime there's someone in transition, I coach so many people through transition in their business life. And then I do some personal coaching, but it's mainly in the business space. Somebody was a sales rep. Now they're a sales manager. Somebody was a manager. Now they're an owner. Somebody now merged two companies, they're merging a culture. Somebody is now gathering people and they're going to have to pitch to investors. There's all these transition times, and that's where I tend to coach people. And what I have to help them understand is the person that got you here is not the person that audience is expecting to see. Great sales rep. Now you literally have to flip a switch and be a great sales manager. And so think about what you want that legacy to be and helping them to recognize that so they know what pieces of that brand to elevate. And I have seen so many successful stories, which I'm very, very honored to have been a small part of those journeys. But I've also seen the ones that didn't work because they couldn't keep it up. They didn't have the motor to keep it up. And so that's the other thing I would tell people is, if you are going in this direction, this is a decision to leave other pieces of yourself behind. I love that definition. I've never looked that up either. That's great. But this is full steam ahead. That train is leaving the station. You got to be ready to keep it up.
Well, I think there's a part of it when I hear, where you never will have a problem keeping it up is if you're being true to yourself. Because that's the key to all of this. And I think there's a great message in that we need to put a pin in, which is this isn't like fake it till you make it. This is actually self-examination. This is really looking at who you are and then discovering maybe some aspects of yourself so that you are in fact true to yourself. You said something that reminded me of whatever the quote was, and I'm probably not doing it justice at all, which is, what got you here isn't going to get you to where you need to go. And so wherever you want to go, if it's not where you're at, then you have to say, what do I have to do differently? How do I have to show up differently? And, in the context that we're talking about today, I love it is that, giving yourself a brand or holding the space for you creating a brand for yourself is just a great context, a great box to play in.
And I would never tell you to create a brand that isn't you, because you're not going to be able to keep it up. You're not going to have the energy to do it and fake it. And that's also where people go off brand, is they got a brand that was too big for them. And then they're like, oh, I can't do it. And people will ask me, how do I make sure I continue to reinforce this? Leaders have bad days. Everybody does. We're human, right? But it's making sure that face you're putting to the world. You and I both know this. There were days when we've been on stages in front of hundreds of people where, the night before we were sick as a dog with a cold or something, but you're going to put that suit on, you're going to get up on that stage and you're going to do the thing because they're looking to see you, right? And that's the brand that we're selling. People recognize that. And could you have a bad day? Of course. Are we human? Of course. But it's how you want them to remember you and being willing to make the sacrifice to keep that brand going. And on the day when it's not going to be there, stay home that day. It's okay. You need a break. There's a story in the book about a newscaster. His name is Sean, and he calls his radio broadcast person Sean plus 10%.
That's great.
Totally true. And I totally resonate with that. I'm sure you do too. And he's like, when I can't be Sean plus 10%, then I stay home and I watch football. And I'm like, I love that.
Well, I often use the phrase that the difference between good and great is only 10%. And, it's an interesting, place to go. I think that what showed up for me, and because of the research I think you've probably done, when we look at this conversation about brand and really being who you are, so being true to yourself, the audience is a range of demographics, but when you look at, for example, what we're seeing on social media, now I know you've had the experience, I've had it. I mean, I see people that I know who on social media, they're putting stuff out there and I'm going, that is such bullshit. I can barely stand it. I either unfollow, I unfriend, I ignore. I can't take it. It just pushes my buttons. But anyways, that's an aside, but it really does state, to me, it's a statement of being cautious that you're not being influenced to the degree that, I want to be that guy or that girl. It really is. And gosh, now I just think about the pronouns. No, that person, we have to be really cautious, I think. No, I'm not cautious at all. My point is that we have to be really aware of that's not necessarily the qualities that we have that we can embrace. Just be who we are and then really deliver off of that.
And I talk a lot about that in the book. And I'm sales, not marketing. I would say social media is marketing, but we have to remember that's everybody's highlight reel. Come on. That's the best plays of the game, right? It's what they want to put out there. But also recognizing that whatever you put out there, you can't actually take back. You don't know who put a screenshot of that. You don't know who shared it. So monitoring that as well. That is part of your brand. And you've got to protect your brand. You've got to defend your brand, and recognizing that whatever you're posting, and there are hundreds of stories out there in the world of people who destroyed their brand and got fired because of something they posted or whatever. The world is a very small place. We are very interconnected, and knowing that. But I laugh about sort of, the highlight reel is not real. Yeah. Would argue for those people, they're selling against themselves by doing that because they're not being true to the brand. They're in combative. Doesn't
make sense. So let's talk. Let's go. I'm going to go down a little different path here. Dr. Cindy, you're here. You've been around doing what you're doing for a long time, and you've written the book. But let's talk about how you got here. I mean, you're educated. You're passionate about what you're doing. Tell me a little bit about your background. I'm always curious. Is it nature or is it nurture? So I can't help it. I go back to, tell me a little bit about your growing up. Were your parents entrepreneurial? Were they scholastic, given that you've got doctor in front of your name? I love that, by the way. I got a buddy of mine who's Dr. Don. He's a chiropractor, and we have lots of fun. And he's really, talk about brand. There's a guy who's just done a brilliant job of being himself, but different conversation. So let's go back to what I'm saying about you. How did you get to where you are today? What was the influence of your parents?
So my dad was gone a lot. It was just my dad and I mostly, and he was gone a ton. He was working and I was sort of solo, and my rebellious nature was that I was going to be a good student, which now I'm looking back, I'm like, well, that was a terrible rebellion. That was my rebellion, was I'm going to show you, So I have older brothers and sisters. They were all out of the house by then. And I've thought a lot about this actually, because where did that come from? Where did those pieces come from? And I think it was that I knew I had this passion to help. And so I thought I was going to be a teacher. I went through this whole thing of I was going to be a college professor. And then I was like, oh, wait, maybe 18 to 22-year-olds are not my jam. I want to go talk to the business world. And then as I got into that, I got pushed into a sales role. And I literally thought I was going to get fired. I'm like, there's no way I can do this job. I'm not a salesperson. 6 months into this, I went, how in the world do I have a PhD in communication and I was never taught sales? I went to good schools. I had great education. There's a hole in the curriculum. And so that started a whole nother path. You want to talk about a rebrand, right? It was a college professor, then a consultant, then moved to an author, because I had to tell people this story. And I went, if I have a PhD in communication and I did not learn sales skills, who else doesn't know this secret? Like, they've got to know this. And then that led me to talking about personal branding with people and helping people to realize you're selling yourself already and you're selling the wrong thing. And that's why you're not getting what you want. So it's this sort of helpaholic within me that started at a very young age of I want to help. And that's what brought me here.
Well, I guess, when you look at, your comment earlier, your rebellious nature, then you see a gap and you go, hold it, there's a gap here. I got to fill this gap. I'm going to get all over it. And you're going to, stand on top of a mountain and yell about the gap that you want to fill and, start to go down that path of supporting people because you see the gap. Now, in your business, have you always been in this business? Is this your first business? Is this your second, your fifth? How's your journey been along all of this?
So same helpaholic nature, right? So I a lot of your audience will recognize this. I started my business in the end of 2008, right? When the crash happened. And I said, I go help people make money. I know how to do this. So I quit my job and I started a company, launched in early 2009 to help companies to grow. And in that journey, and I've had this company ever since, so we're coming up on 14 years almost. And then in that, it evolved. And with the pandemic, people needed more skills development. So I developed an online academy, which, funny enough, that was actually my idea 14 years ago, but it wasn't quite ready. People weren't quite ready for online learning. So that led to that. And then there's books in the meantime. So it's always been, I think at the core, I'm still a teacher. I still want to help people with the lessons that I'm learning. And as I learn, I want to share that. And that's really where it comes from, is just the minute I learn something, I'm like, okay, I got to help people. I got to help them know this too.
Well, and I'm sure you've dug into that over the years of what the nature is, the drive is to help people. But, I want to go back to something, in building, because you talk about your online business and it was a little bit early. 14 years ago, that's still pretty early. What have you experienced, or when you think about brand, but when you even think about your business today? I think we can all agree the world has shrunk, and it's shrunk primarily because of technology. Here I am sitting in the comforts of my office. You're sitting in the comforts of your office in a totally different city, in a totally different, part of North America. What has it meant to you, number one, on the business side of what you do? And then what do you see it even for some of your clients?
So what was interesting when the pandemic happened, our clients kind of freaked out a little bit because they were like, wait a minute, now we have these hybrid teams, we're virtual, what do we do? I actually started the company almost 14 years ago as a virtual company in the same place. And we're a bunch of consultants. You got to get on a plane to go to work. You live where you want to live, right? So it's fine by me. But they were struggling. A lot of our clients were struggling with that because they're like, how do we do this? How do we manage them? How do we keep the culture? And I'm like, we got this. What do you want to know? So we shifted towards a lot of leadership development and those kinds of things. And as the world shrinks, I think we learn from each other. We've been using Zoom for many, many years, but we had a very small fraction of our clients that were willing to do it. Now everybody's on Zoom, and now we wish that we'd use the phone some days.
Yeah, totally.
So it's, as the world is shrinking, I think we learn more from each other. And I think as the world is evolving and as we're kind of moving through this economy and the changes in the economy, it's an opportunity to observe where we came from, what we're learning now, what we need to learn to bring ourselves to the next level. And that's always my goal, is to be, like I say, 2 car lengths ahead. My crystal balls on back order, I guess, but I try to do the 2 car lengths ahead to be able to help people and say, okay, I think the rebrand is going to come. Let me do something to fix that. Let me do something to help.
So when you look around the world today, and I know this is a little bit off topic, and I'll come back around, Dr. Cindy, but you're in San Francisco. You look at what's happening economically, you look at the headlines, you look particularly, what's going on in the US, particularly what's going on in, California and all the conversations that they've got going on there. Are you seeing the degree of, I guess, the sky is falling headlines or the sky is falling narrative, and your clients are at the effect of that as well? Or how are you kind of viewing the world? Because you come at it, very optimistic, full of energy, but in behind the scenes, and especially, given the part of the country that you live in, what are you are you operating on top of anything?
Yeah. So it's very funny that you say that, because I have probably sent 50 emails in the last couple of months about stop saying to your team, the sky is falling. It's not. So literally those words. And I think these are the times where it's a time for leadership. I think this is a time for you to steal market share. I think, while everybody's pulling back and putting their head in the sand, this is your chance, but you have to be bold, you have to be brave, and you have to be willing to be uncomfortable to do it. And that's so much of our coaching with our clients right now. And as the world evolves and the economy evolves and changes are happening, I'm the gal that quit my job in 2008. So, I guess I was like, I'm in sales. If it doesn't work, I'll go get a job. But I think that this shifting economy is actually an opportunity for people if they're willing to be brave enough to take it. And we've got some clients that, they're like, hey, we're doubling down. We're going to hire salespeople. We're going to get out there. I've got other people that are going, I'm looking for investments. I'm looking for people to buy. I'm looking for companies. I'm looking for buildings. I think that's the entrepreneurial spirit. And this is your moment, but your brand feeds into that. Did you plan appropriately to be ready to take care of this opportunity and take advantage of it? And if you didn't, you got to get to work fast.
It's interesting that there's a response, the fight, flight, or freeze response that happens in times of, challenges. And of course, we see a lot of people sitting on the sidelines, kind of frozen, waiting for something to happen. And, there's a part of what happens in all this bad news scenario. So first off, when the market, when COVID and we got locked down in the middle of March 2020, we literally 2 weeks later were having live event meetings. I had an international team that we were on Zoom, 2 years, 3 years prior to that. So like Zoom and all of the back, the dashboard, the horsepower and behind the scenes, we were already there. So we literally pivoted the next weekend kind of thing and had some great events. Now that's all to say this, is that we see a lot of people sitting on the sidelines, and this is kind of my philosophy. I want your perspective. That's why I'm giving you this long-winded kind of conversation. So I'm seeing this and I'm looking at it, and everybody started to hate the new normal, the new normal, the new normal. What's the new normal? And a lot of people are going, I can hardly wait to get back to where it was. Well, we know we're not going back there. And there is this thing about a new normal. And also, that phrase is not used as much anymore. At least I'm not hearing it as much. And I'm fairly dialed in, I think. But the point is that right now, it's like people are waiting for an event. Like something's going to happen and the world's going to fall off a cliff. And I realized for me that I was starting to look at it that way, just, the inundated of the research I do and just all the things that happens with our research team. But it's all to say this. What I got to is this. It isn't going to be an event. There could be some events. There could be even a black swan. We don't know. But really, what is the new normal is the fact that Russia, Ukraine, they're going to fight for a long time. China, India, deglobalization, these are all things that are actually happening. They're not happening overnight. They are in a process. And it's up to us as leaders to look into the future of what's happening, not be shut down by it, but say, okay, let's navigate, because in every bit of chaos that happens on a global scale, a national scale, it doesn't matter. There's opportunities that emerge if you're wired to say, hold it, get rid of the crap, because in amongst all that is where opportunities live. And we look at, we go back to 9/11 as an example. We go back to what's just happened with the COVID lockdown, I mean, there are so many opportunities that have come out of this. And although it's a little challenging at times to see the light through all of the clutter and the darkness, that's how I see it. That's my conversation. How are you seeing it? And what are your clients, how are you guiding your clients in that, Dr. Cindy?
So I see it through a very similar lens. I see this as the opportunity. And I have said to many clients and potential clients over the last couple of months, I can give you a gas pedal or I can give you a bucket of sand. The choice is yours. And we're the gas pedal, bucket of sand. You do what you do, you stay there, you freeze and ride this out. But I think what people have to recognize is the economy is cyclical. What goes up comes down, then it goes back up. Like, this is not new. This shouldn't have been a surprise. Granted, there were world events and some horrible things that happened and all sorts of stuff. But when we look at just from an economic standpoint, there was quite a wave that was being ridden. Real estate agents, there was
sure
all these things, right? We knew this was cyclical. We knew it was going to come down. What did we do to prepare? And that's where I think where one of our superpowers as a company is we do try to see those 2 car lengths ahead. We say, okay, well, wait, what are you saving for the rainy day? How are you, working on your staffing? What are you doing to winterize early? How are the things that we're doing this? So that's the advice that we're giving our clients. But what we're also saying is seek the opportunity that you can take advantage of in this moment. Like, so often in the organizations we work in, they'll have salespeople and they think, well, that's their job. Well, I would argue that every job is a sales job, right? So what are you doing to mobilize the internal people to make your current customers happier, to make your potential customers want to come back, to make your current customers want to send you referrals? What are the things you're doing to differentiate yourself? How are you using the time you have, this quote, downtime, to make things more robust? And if you're not, why not? Because that's a choice. And so that's just a couple of things that we're working on with our clients. But it again is the lens you look at it through, and whether you're willing to say there is opportunity here.
It is interesting, right? If you're frozen, I know in, my years of business, which I'm touching 38 years that I've been a business owner and self-employed. I've gone through highs and lows, made lots of mistakes for sure, and, learned from them and kept moving on. The point is that there's, an old phrase I heard, I don't even know if it's appropriate, but it was in, the phrase was, in God we trust, but tie up your camel, which always meant to me, is that pay attention in that, yes, you can trust the universe, you can trust God or whatever you might believe in, but it's still your responsibility to risk mitigate. It's still your responsibility to lock the doors in your car. These are things that even in times like this, is that all of that is out there. Don't be blind to it. In the past couple of years, of course, anybody who is in real estate was a freaking genius. And now, of course, rates are going up and everybody's going, "No, I'm an idiot." So I've seen these cycles many times over the years. We joke about it all the time. I want to go back and talk about leadership. And, one of the things in your book, and you talk about leadership, I think for me, I don't think there's a natural born leader. I think leaders train themselves or they hone those skills. But I'm often surprised by my guests. They're some pretty astute guests like yourself. And then I don't know what your answer is, by the way. But for me, leadership, maybe I'm just not that smart. I have to hone my skills. I have to be focused on being a good leader. It's what I read. It's what I listen to. It's what I try. What's your experience when it comes to, aside from the brand building side of it, but when you're coaching your clients, what are you seeing with some of your more successful clients?
Well, so I believe there's a huge difference between management and leadership. So I want to kind of give a definition because I think they're both really important. I think the management side is more the process stuff, and I think the leadership side is the people side. So I think that you can have a natural knack for the job itself, but how good are you at sort of peopling? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a skill set that you hone. And you have to continually hone that. That is a saw that must continually be sharpened. Your people are constantly changing. Their why is constantly changing. There's all these things in the news right now about quiet quitting and quiet firing. I don't know that I believe it or disagree with it, but I think it's interesting because it's leadership that I would say is part of this thing. We have to make sure leaders are truly leading. So I do agree with you that there is definitely a skill set that is honed in there. But I would say there is something innate in a leader that makes them a leader and not just a manager. And I do think that might be born, which is the desire to lead. I think that has to be within you.
Good
I think
answer.
I teach you the other things. You got to want to do it, though.
Oh, good answer. Okay, that's good. That's a perspective that hadn't been offered to me before. Good answer. Okay,
Thanks.
you pass. You pass. So, one of the things that I've discovered over the years, and I think this is still plays into the brand narrative, is, one of the things that I pride on myself on is I don't have, I've got 3 different businesses, and regardless of what's happened economically, I don't turn over staff historically. I just really don't. And it's not to say that we haven't. It's just that it's, I've got staff, and one of my businesses has been with me 25 years and 15 years. And, and I think that comes from 2 words that I often use, and that is environment and culture. And, really creating and making sure that the team is aligned. And one of the exercises I do with my team, and I pretty much do it every year, sometimes depending on if I've added to the team or not, is you define the culture. I'm not working in the office with you. I'm not working in the business with you. So my leaders, my managers, and the team have to collectively, and I mean everybody sits down and has a conversation. What kind of culture do we want, and what kind of environment do we want to work in? And I'll give you an example of that just for listeners. When I talk about environment, I'm talking about, is the lunchroom clean? Is the standard that we hold that lunchroom is clean? Last person to use a glass, wash it, set it on the counter. That's the rule, right? Yes. That also creates a culture that we're not in this alone. We're collaborating. We're understanding and respecting the other. That's culture. So those 2, we have a very definitive exercise, and I go through, sometime all day having conversations. And I'll tell you what, we've reinvented the culture a number of times, and it's probably the most powerful exercise that I do from my perspective. But when you talk about from your perspective in a brand, how do you approach that, Dr. Cindy?
So I love that you do that. First of all, I think that's really cool. And we're big on culture here as well. And like one of our values is that we take fun seriously. That's literally one of our core values. And so I think we live that brand. We are a group of very snarky people that are very humorous. There are dad jokes flying. Like that's part of our culture as a virtual company. So I think that that's a huge piece of leadership, that you have to give your people enough freedom to be themselves and bring their whole selves to work and create a culture that they feel safe, doing these things. But when it comes to branding, like your own brand, I do think with a leader, they're watching not only what you say, not only the survey that you're doing, not only the exercise, but they're watching how you're exhibiting that as well. And they're watching, are you seeing something in the lunchroom when you are there the 2 times a year and you pick up that wrapper off the floor? Are they seeing? And I think that sometimes leaders don't pay attention to the fact that they are watching you more than you think, even if you're not physically there. The emails have tones, the, voicemail has a tone, the video message, all of those things are contributing to that culture. And they're either building it up or, and I'm going to be very bold and say this, they're tearing it down, because those are the only 2 choices. You're not maintaining it. You're either building it or pulling against it.
What's interesting about what you just said, there's lots of about what you just said, but what stands out in all of that is that when you define the culture, there's a couple of things that, number one, the devil's in the details, right? You really have to, it's the nuances that make the difference, because as soon as somebody's out of line with that, it's like that, that kind of stone or that pebble in your shoe, right? It gets really irritating, and after a while it gets really painful, and then you got to take that shoe off and get rid of it. And it's interesting when we talk about brand and when we kind of are sitting down and considering adding somebody to the team, I think the clearer we are on the culture, the clearer we are on the environment, the different way we ask questions, because aside from the talent somebody might have and the skills that they bring to the table, it's the age-old, it's like, we can't fire him. He's the best sales guy on the team. He's doing like this, right? Yes, but he's an asshole. He's got to go, right?
Right.
So it's that, right? So when you create a brand and a container that is really focused on values and culture, environment, it changes how you hire.
And it should change how you hire. And should everywhere. But
Yeah.
I really do believe that, because if you're not living that, that is going against your own leadership legacy. You are actually selling the wrong thing to your people. And when you don't address, I call those prickly people, like you have that prickly person and you're holding on to them because they were the best salesperson or because they're the subject matter expert, but they hate everyone and should never be allowed to talk to another human. That's tearing the fabric of your culture. And it's also tearing away your leadership legacy, because your non-action is still a sales thing. You are still selling something with your non-action. And I think people forget that. And I'll tell you the funniest story. So most of our team members have come from someone on our team that knows someone else. And they're like, oh, we got a place for this. I got a guy. I got a gal. It's great. And last person that joined our team was someone that came through someone we knew. He was hired. He doesn't even know this. And when he listens to this podcast, he'll laugh. He was hired before his interview. And the reason he was hired before his interview is because he completely picked up on the nuances of the culture in the emails to schedule the interview. He's got it. He's in. He was dropping funny lines from movies. I was like, oh, you fit here great.
But that's so interesting. And I think there's something in all of that is, if we're going to speak into the values of where we want to go, we have to understand what those values are. So he obviously shared those same values. Otherwise, he wouldn't have even seen them. He would have probably looked at it and go, these guys are weird, but I'll apply anyways. But no, he goes, oh, this is cool. If they want to play that game, I'm all in. And he plays that game. So, it's interesting that the more we wear our values on our sleeve and wear them in our brand, the more likely we are to very effectively and efficiently even create the flow of not only business but team that align with those values. And the people who don't align, well, quite frankly, they're no good as clients anyways, or they're just too hard to work. And I'm sure you find that even in your coaching. We say, we're coaches, not coaxes. We're not here to coax you, we're here to coach you. So you got to do it and understand that. And then, of course, when you're hiring people, you then are attracting the people that want to work with you in the context of those very values.
It is so true. And it's interesting, like the coach coax. I love that, by the way. I often say I'm a coach, not a counselor, because it spans that line too. But when you're truly attracting that, it builds itself to a degree, but it's your job to maintain it, right? And you're building that brand. And I actually wrote a blog not that long ago about the difference between your company brand and your personal brand. And they get very confused. Both. They have to coexist harmoniously, and more than harmoniously, complementary to one another. And when you're leading that, that team or that brand, or you're assembling that team, it's recognizing how you're selling who you are and what you want those team members to be. My goal is to, I joke about this all the time. I'm the dancing chicken. The rest of the team does literally everything else. I'm the dancing chicken. I go and I give the speech, and then magic happens elsewhere. And I'm not allowed to touch technology, and there's all sorts of things. Right?
Sure, of course.
I want them to be their best, most powerful selves, because as a team, we're so much stronger for that. And I think you build a culture around that. And I think that this is where some leaders make the mistake that we put people in a box and we say, but you live here and you're so good at this, I'm not going to let you grow, because that wouldn't be good for me.
Well, that's an interesting point, right? Is that once you get into that kind of a dynamic where people are afraid that they're going to be left out of the light, if you will, or not have the same job, that can shut things down as well. I forgot about that, but that's a really good point that you make. And I think people need to pay attention to it. Now, I want to go off on just, we got some time here, I hope. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the demographics of what you're seeing in the world, because, we see these demographics becoming more and more, differentiated. We're talking about 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds versus boomers and 40-year-olds. When you look at what's happening in the world based on your client base, Dr. Cindy, are you, what are you saying to millennials, or what are you saying to the? No, I've lost the other one, Club Zetters. I've lost it anyways. But my point is that there's so many, and it's really the lines seem to be getting really drawn in the sand. And maybe that's just me getting
No,
old,
they are.
but that's what it seems to me.
So I have this conversation at least a couple times a week with clients because there's sort of a complaint or a gripe about the younger generations. And I'm like, I need you to remember that you were them.
Mm-hmm.
We were all them. We were all the, I'm not anymore, but I was the younger generation too, that didn't do it the way the old way did it and all of these things. And it's like, my invitation to people is, do you want to go back to carbon paper? Like, was that fun? Because things change. We have to change with it.
Yeah.
Will bring innovation, right? And when we're looking at those differences, I think we learn from that. I think you learn from the bottom up, side to side, and top down. And if we're embracing the differences and allowing people to be their most powerful self, and I think we're at that place in business actually where it's no longer, everybody wears a blue suit. It is embracing the individuality more and the diversity of the team and the ages and, all of these things. That makes the team more powerful because you're getting different viewpoints. You're not in an echo chamber anymore, but you've got to be willing to maybe recognize that, yeah, that person doesn't really check snail mail. Mm-hmm. It's not a thing. So we're going to learn to text, and it's a give and a take on both sides. And there's a little bit of resistance a lot of times. And I think the most dangerous phrase in business is because we've always done it. And we've just met and I know you agree with me. Yeah. So, if that's the way we've always done it, okay, then why are we still? Because the times have changed around us. Does it still work? Is it still the most powerful way to make an impact? And if it's not, then let's listen to these other viewpoints. So that generational thing, I think we have a very big span in our organization. We go up to 60s and our youngest is, I think, 23. Yeah. So we cover them all.
It is an interesting dynamic. I think one of my superpowers and is that my ability that, although my team would tease me about my short-term memory or the lack thereof, or my wife, but my point is that what I'm able to do very effectively and that is put myself back to when I was 20 and 30 and 40. Yeah. And so when I'm talking to either members of the team or members of our community, I can really relate to where they are. I don't have to have a judgment around it. All I have to do is go back there. And I literally, in my mind, time travel and go back to where I was thinking and how I was thinking back when I was 35 or 30 or 40. And because I've got, the age I've got, maybe they call that wisdom. I don't know. I woke up at 60 one time and said, gosh, maybe I'm wiser. And I'm going, no, I'm not wise at all. And I go, well, that's pretty wise. Like I have these conversations about what is wisdom, right? So I think that it's something that everybody needs to just sometimes stop and contemplate. There was a time as a boomer, there was a time where I'd be having conversations with people and they go, I'm never going to, and I think it's part of what was happened in our culture is, when I grow up or when I'm an adult, I'm never gonna be what my mom and dad are or what they did to me and all the trials and tribulations that people had. And I look at them and now in these conversations over the years, and I always come back as I listen, and I always come back with one question: did you turn out so bad?
Right. I love that. It's like,
did you turn out so bad? And they go, yeah, but I do you know what it took to get me here? I go, it took what it took. If you didn't go through what you went through, you wouldn't be here. So do you not like being here? Is there someplace you think you should be? It's so for me, it's a kind of a narrative that, why are you being a victim to your life? Gosh, you turned out pretty good. As you sit around and drink $100 bottle of wine, it's like, what are you talking about? So anyways, I find these dynamics very interesting. And so I think that this all goes back to, really sell yourself is understanding yourself and then being really thoughtful and intentional about how you want to show up, who you want to be, what you want to do.
Well, and I want to underscore that victim piece because I do talk about that in the book. And I think people don't recognize that they're selling that. Mm. And they're telling those stories. And thankfully, they have a coach like you who's holding up that mirror saying, is life really that bad with your $100 bottle of wine? Like, really? It's the fuck? Because it looks pretty good from over here. But I think that that's one of those things we have to have that honest inventory for ourselves, because they are selling the victim mentality as part of that. And I have a client who runs a multi-million-dollar business very successfully and tells the poor me story. And I keep correcting this person.
Wow.
And I saying, you are literally running people's dream job and you're telling the poor me story. You're tearing apart at other people's dreams because they're seeing you as the dream. You got to think about that narrative.
Fascinating that they would come to that. There's a book that I often recommend. No, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to read it, and I recommend it a lot. And Extreme Ownership.
Yes, great book.
Jocko Willink, and it's such a great book. And I've read it twice. I recommend it. I pick it up every so often when I'm feeling sorry for myself, and read it again. So it's really that. It's just not being. Don't blame, don't complain. But I am guilty, and I had somebody call me out on it on social media once. I was doing something. I was commenting, I think, politically on something, which I'm apt to do, but he called me out for complaining, and I went, yeah, but I have the right. I'm a voter. I need to bitch about politics. Anyways, so I still do that. I got to admit that I do complain about the politics. Okay, so Dr. Cindy, it's been, you've blessed us with your time and lots of insights, really good. And as we wind things down, I always just try and have a little bit of fun with some, rapid, not so rapid fire questions. And so, you ready to go to work?
I'm ready.
Okay. Well, this one's an easy one. What book, other than your own, what book are you reading, or what's a book that you would like to gift or that you do gift?
So I love this book. It's called Straight Talk, and it's by Rick Brandon. And I was an endorser on the book because I loved it so much. He's a consultant, he's a coach, but it is truly, this is how we should be communicating. And especially given all the changes in the world and those generational gaps and that we're trying to close, it's fantastic. And it's very educational, but very entertaining.
It's interesting. Stephanie has used the term straight talk for years. I don't know if she's read the book or not. I'm going to have to ask her. She reads a lot. Give me the premise of the book, because it sounds interesting, just quickly.
So it is literally a workshop in a book, but it's basically helping people to have more pointed conversations without, and very much leadership. His first book around being politically savvy. It's one of those, I think, for leaders, a must read.
Okay, I'm on it. Favorite inspirational quote? Do you have one that you can think of? Probably many, but does one come to mind?
Wow, I do have a ton. One of my favorite ones is actually, and I'm going to butcher it because it's I paraphrase it all the time, but it's gratitude is, and having gratitude and not showing it is like having a gift and not giving it. I'm a gratitude girl. It's one of my favorite things. And I start my morning with that. And it's one of those where if I'm ever having that day where I'm feeling sorry for myself, it's like, come on, McGovern, get it together.
Another book recommendation, just because you brought it up, and I like to throw book recommendations out for people because I think that, you're only as good as you read, but anyways, or some version of that. The Gap and the Gain, which was a book that was just released, Benjamin Hardy, and I'm really bad at names. It'll come to me. Anyways, The Gap and the Gain, he is an absolute icon in the coaching world. He owns and runs a Strategic Coach, has been around for, he's 79 years old, still going strong, absolutely brilliant. Anyways, The Gap and the Gain, which he talks about how much we focus on the gap as A-type personalities and overachievers. We're always looking at what we didn't achieve as opposed to looking at the gain. This somewhat speaks to gratitude, but as individuals and, business owners, we're always looking at, well, we wanted 30, we only got 22, so we're looking at what we didn't get as opposed to the 22 we didn't gain. Granted, it might not have been enough, but the point is we have a tendency to look at the gap instead of the gain. That book was really profound for me. And one of the kind of analogies or metaphors they use is, as business owners and entrepreneurs, we're always heading towards the horizon, and we're always going to reach the horizon. And of course, it doesn't matter what part of the world you're in, you will never reach that horizon. And it was a realization that we look ahead at the horizon wanting to get there, and we forget about all the ground we covered, or we ignore all the ground we covered. Anyways, The Gap in the Gain, recommended reading. So sorry, I went off on a tangent again, which I
love that, though.
likely to do.
Check it out.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the gates, Dr. Cindy?
You did good.
You did good.
You did your job.
iPhone or Android?
I'm an Android.
You're Android. You're not Apple. Isn't that interesting?
No, I know, and it's right up the road.
You're so cool that I would have thought Apple for sure. Okay. Your room, your desk, or your car, what do you clean first?
Oh, my room.
Your room. You like a clean room. Okay.
The feng shui.
Okay. Feng shui. Yes, of course. Oh my gosh, I've heard these before. Okay. Favorite tune or band? Are you a music file, or what do you like?
So it changes all the time, depending on what I'm working on. If I'm writing, it's something. But I am a huge Patsy Cline fan. Old school.
Oh, no kidding. Hey.
Country. Yeah. Old school. Yeah.
That's a little bit of the romantic in you. Look at that. Patsy Cline is that. For me, anyways. I don't listen to Patsy Cline, but she's awesome. She is very, very good. Cool. Favorite movie? Do you have one?
Ooh, those change around too. You know, one of my favorites that I go to and I watch every single year, though, is Love Actually.
Okay. I don't know that movie. Who's in it?
Oh my gosh, cast of characters. Jude Law, Cameron Diaz.
Oh, okay.
1,001 actors. It's like 5 vignettes all in one.
And say it again?
The ending. Love Actually.
Love Actually. Okay. I don't think I've seen it. I'm pretty sure I haven't. Now, not the final question. Oh, I'm going to ask you this one anyways. Favorite swear word?
Oh man, what is my favorite swear word? I don't even know.
You don't have a go-to?
I don't know that I have a go-to.
Okay.
Probably the S word, if I have one. I don't think I have a go-to.
Okay. Well, you know something? We get it all over but I'm an F-bomb. I F-bomb all the time. And then sometimes I go through a period, I got to improve my command of the English language. So, and then I have guests that go, I don't swear. I go, really?
My husband teases me because he says I sound like Charlie Brown because I'll say good grief. Like a swear word.
Yeah, well,
so I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess maybe that's my go-to because he teases about it. So maybe that's my word.
Well, that's not so bad. Okay, Dr. Cindy, what are you grateful for today?
I am grateful for the opportunity to talk with you and talk with your audience and be able to leave, hopefully, this lesson with folks to help them get more of what they want in their life.
Yeah, me too. I'm always grateful for my guests and the opportunity that it creates with this show. And I'm always grateful for my family, my wife, and my home. My 2 dogs, by the way. I have to give a shout out to my 2 burners, and we have lots of fun. So, Dr. Cindy, thank you so much for the time and the energy that you brought to the show today. Very, very appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. If you found value in the podcast, please take the time to rate and review and share with others. Share with your friends. As it is my goal to always improve and to provide the highest value for you, the listener. If you have any comments, suggestions, or questions you'd like answered, please email me at ceo@reincanada.com. That's ceo@reincanada.com. I look forward to hearing from you. And until next time, Patrick out.